What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Golden Rock MMA podcast.
What's going on, everybody? Like we usually do, let's just jump to some quick rumored fights and news that's going on in the MMA world.
Not much, huh?
We got about 3 of them. So, anyways, we got Cain Velasquez versus Francis Gano. Rumors are that they're gonna fight on February 17th on ESPN 1 in Phoenix, Arizona.
I think it's a bad matchup for both of them. Francis Gano coming off of a win. Given a person like Cain Velasquez, who if Cain Velasquez wins, Francis Ngannou goes back to the drawing board. But then again, Cain Velasquez is one of the greatest heavyweight champions of all, if not the greatest heavyweight champion. After a big layoff, comes back into the UFC and gets knocked out by Francis Ngannou, or gets beaten by Francis Ngannou, a guy that. So I don't think it's a good fight for either one of them. Stylistically, I think it's going to be an interesting one.
Well, if the reality is that if Cain wants to put the pressure on Francis doesn't stand a chance.
Right.
I mean, Francis needs to find a way to keep a distance from someone like Cain. It almost seems impossible. But then again, Cain has been in such a long layoff. What Cain are we going to see? So that's one of the things that you need to, going into this fight, really think about. What Cain is going to go in there, because we obviously know what Francis is capable of doing, because he just came off of a huge victory for Bayless.
Right, but the notoriety for both fighters, I just don't know if that's good for their careers right now. But anyways, at the end of the day, it's a really good fight. It's something to look forward to. But I'm just really not happy with them giving Francis Ngannou on his first dip back into the octagon.
And then we have Mickey Gall versus Diego Sanchez, which is the vet Diego Sanchez, fighting March 2nd in Vegas at UFC 235, which seems to be the fight. That is designed for both of them. You got someone like Diego who just came off a big victory in his career, because we really don't know if he's in the downside of his career, upside of his career, just because he floats too much in that lane. Mm-hmm. And you got someone like Mickey Gall who's really on the uprising, made a big name off making a fool out of freaking CM Punk, end up coming back, getting another victory. I can't recall exactly who he ended up fighting. And now you're starting to see the UFC making a push for this guy, Mickey Gall, and putting him up against the veterans. Contemplating retirement for Diego Sanchez might be on the list if he takes this loss to such a young guy, because if you lose to a young guy like this, there's really not much promising in that weight class for him.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. However, I think it's a good fight for both fighters. Diego Sanchez, we've seen enough of him already. Whether he wins or loses, he could, like you said, he could contemplate retirement. But Mickey Gall, like a young buck, he's still coming up in the game. Really good wins throughout his career so far in the UFC. I think this is another cap on his hat if he takes out Diego Sanchez. The question is who it would be next at that point.
I agree. So next fight too, we had once again, these are some of them, like this Diego Sanchez fight seems to be official. And then the other fight that seems to be official as well, because we do know that the Cain versus Francis is still on the works.
Right.
Excuse me. Zabit, which I won't even butcher his last name. He probably has the longest last name in UFC history. Versus Jeremy Stephens, which is also set for March 2nd in Las Vegas. These fights would make great fights if you just find a way to squeeze them all into the main event, man.
Yeah. It's a tough one. There's so many good fights coming up, and you want to stack up a card, but some of these fights are like two of those 3 fighters could headline easily. So it's important to spread them out just enough where you get more viewers this way. You know what I mean?
Just talk about the fight. You got someone who's so well-rounded in the Zabit, but really has he really been challenged with the fighter? Right, like the fighter that people are like, man, for him to take such a huge, massive leap to someone like Jeremy Stephens, it's a huge deal for that weight class, especially really implementing where Zabit really stands in that weight class. You got someone like Jeremy Stephens who is one punch away from winning every single bout, and then you have someone like Zabit who is so agile, really feints, doesn't take impact much because he does so well. He's so quick on his feet, but then he's just so well-rounded. Takes you down, will submit you, stand-up game, just will outscore you in all sense. how much power does Zabit have behind his kicks and his right hand? It's the big question mark going into this fight.
You're completely right. You know, he won his second fight his first fight by KO. The second fight he went to decision is one of the ones that we went to go see in Brooklyn.
Really made a name for himself there, and he fought there with a broken right hand.
Right.
And I think that happened in the ending of the first round, and still stuck it out all the way to the third round and win that fight. Complete dominance.
And then, you know, he submits the next fighter, whoever he fought. I don't remember these guys' names. He submits him. So you could, what I'm trying to say is that, you know, he has KO power. He has a way where he could literally break you down if he doesn't have the enough power during that fight to knock you out.
I disagree. I don't think he has. I don't think he has KO power yet. Like, he hasn't been known to have KO power.
I think with the, you know, he throws so many punches throughout that I believe that he could eventually finish you in the later rounds. That's why he did finish the last fighter he fought with a submission. You know what I mean? A very unique submission, by the way. But I think that is a good fight. You know, you got Jeremy Stephens who he's looking for that one punch, but could still box you at the same time. And then you have a guy like Zabit who's constantly moving forward, really good counter puncher. Could he take a punch from Jeremy Stephens, or could he win by decision? I don't see either one of this fight not being any KOs. I believe it's going to go to decision.
I agree. I don't think, and Zabit comes from that background where he's fighting with with Khabib, and that's the training camp he's coming from. These guys totally could take a punch. Could take a punch. We saw what Khabib was able to take from Conor, so we know that's capable of Jeremy Stephens throwing a bomb and not knocking him out. Anyways, let's get to the result of UFC on Fox 31. Amazing card. Just great, well put together for the UFC. Kudos to them for doing this. For this card. Also free, started early. I missed some of the fights. I was able to go back and catch some of the fights. So the fight that I did miss originally was the Charles Oliveira versus Jim Miller fight. And Charles Oliveira once again breaks his own record into submitting. I think he's up to 13. 14. Jesus Christ. He has 14 submissions in the UFC, which is he literally stands on a league on his own when it comes to how many submissions someone could do it in a federation, and then beat someone like Jim Miller, who's actually known to be a jiu-jitsu specialist, and gets him in the rear naked choke and ends up beating him literally in the first round. Jim Miller needs to either reevaluate his career or really, once again, going back to these veterans, really contemplate that retirement.
Yeah, I believe he's unfortunately the older man in this sport at this point of his career. I believe they should give him a little more of those type of opponents. I think him and BJ Penn will be a great fight. Feel they could both stand up and they both have good submission skills. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure about how much longer Jim Miller has with the UFC or in the octagon to begin with.
Yeah, I think at this point, him going to another federation doesn't make sense to me. He's been fighting for so long. He's never been a big draw, which doesn't really put much into like any other federation necessarily picking him up. But either way, Charles Oliveira, just phenomenal performance. It's just scary as hell, man. Someone like that takes you down and locks you in.
It's a wrap for you.
There's no way out. There's just no way out. And for him to submit someone as such a great jiu-jitsu specialist like Jim Miller, it speaks volumes on his jiu-jitsu game. The next fight, which was also a phenomenal fight, was Rob Font versus Sergio Pettis. Obviously, Rob Font ended up winning the unanimous decision, just outscored Sergio Pettis, which I did not see that coming from a mile away, to be quite honest with you. I thought it would be the opposite. But it goes back to show you the level of fighters the UFC has. I mean, we talk about Rob Font, if we go back, 10 podcasts back, he was just really somewhat making a name for himself and has found his way into the lane to fight someone like Sergio Pettis. And to beat someone like Sergio Pettis is such a massive deal to his career. And beating him just outclassed him and just moved way better than Sergio. Sergio is just becoming a very predictable and stiff fighter. Mm-hmm. And if you compare him to his brother, one thing you can never say about his brother is it's very predictable. You know what I mean? The only thing you can predict is taking him down and really beating him in the ground. But Sergio, not Sergio. What's the other guy's name? What I'm looking for? Not Sergio Pettis, but his brother. Fuck. Well, come on.
Anthony Pettis.
Anthony Pettis. He has submission games. He's submitted great fighters. Sergio needs to really. He totally is too young to retire or contemplate retirement. Really contemplate like just his training camp. Yeah, your stand-up game is good, but you need to know your ground game. You need to get your jiu-jitsu better. His overall game needs to be stepped up.
I think he works so much with Duke Roof is that I believe that he just doesn't do enough grappling, or I shouldn't say grappling, more like jiu-jitsu to begin with. So you're right. There's a big hole in his game, and he really needs to figure out a way to reevaluate his camp and try to cover that hole that he has in that game.
Edson Barboza versus Dan Hooker, hands down. I would say the best fight that was put up on that card. Edson Barboza is a motherfucker, man. That dude hit him with everything in his right hand. Spinning back kicks to the body, and Dan Hooker just kept coming forward. You could tell he was in agony. He kept coming forward. Didn't have what it takes to beat someone like Edson Barboza.
Not yet. I think he learned a lot from that fight, but I think Edson Barboza shows that he still belongs on the top 5 best lightweight fighters in the UFC. His striking is best to none. One of the best kicks, if not the best kicks in the game. He needs to also continue on with this type of momentum, because one loss and he goes back scratching the floor again, and it's happened to him a couple of times already. This is a huge win for Edson Barboza.
Yeah, and he just looks like he was in his zone, man. He looked like he was zoned. Dan Hooker really didn't have much for him. He kept his distance when he was throwing his leg kicks, and did what he does best. Is that spinning back kick was nasty, bro. It was just absolutely nasty, and such a phenomenal victory for Edson Barboza, who literally just capitalized on his stomach. And as soon as he hit the back kick and saw the opening, he threw that left hook and took them out and ended up winning by TKO in the third round.
That he did, because it could have been a possibility. It could have gone to the decision. It was getting really close at this point. So.
No. I don't think that's a lie. There was no. It definitely wasn't a close fight. I do believe that.
No, close in the sense that they were going to go to decision.
Oh yeah. Well,
I'm not saying like Dan Hooker had no chance. He would have lost in decision. The question is cool that he was able to stop him after so many punishment that he delivered to finally stop him. Because if not, he would have gotten to decision. That's what I meant to say.
Got it. And last but not least, another fight that totally didn't disappoint. There was no knockouts, there was no submission, but just an all-out war between Kevin Lee and Al Iaquinta. Amazing performance by Iaquinta. I know you had him winning. I didn't have him winning. Good call on that. I couldn't agree with you what you said before in the last podcast. What you said was he's found a way to put it all together. He just his facial tissues and he just bleeds for anything. He swells up for everything. So it throws you off sometimes when you look at the ending of the fight and you look at both of their faces. You go, but damn, Iaquinta took a beating. That's just in the nature of some of these fighters. Just a phenomenal performance in his feet. Just overall was able to. You got Kevin Lee who took him down and really made it close rounds, but it was just a little too late for these takedowns. And I think that's what's the confusion behind Kevin Lee assuming he had won the fight with some of these takedowns.
I tell you what, I wouldn't have been mad if they would have given it a draw. I think they both came really close to winning, each one of them. I did have the upper hand for Iaquinta. I believe that he did more work on his feet, and also he was the aggressor. He was the one that was coming after Kevin Lee, and Kevin Lee just kept on moving back. And his corner did tell him, he's like, continue pushing forward, because that's when he's getting hit. The minute Kevin Lee started to move forward himself, you could tell Iaquinta wasn't really comfortable in that spot. So his team told him exactly what he needed to do. He proceeded by doing it, and that's the reason why he won. I literally give that to the corner.
You can't beat that corner, man. Mm-hmm. You got Matt Serra, you got Longo. Like you can't beat the corner you have. And if anybody's gonna push you to the limit and make you push forward is going to be those two guys, because that's what they did their whole careers as well. All right, guys, so that's pretty much it. Next podcast, I'm really looking forward to it because we have the Gustafsson versus John Jones breakdown. Anything you want to say?
Nope.
Nope. All right, guys.
Next week. See you next
Peace,
week.
guys.
Man.